Does Penn State or Michigan have a chance to be the number one program in the Big Ten in the next, let's say, 5 or 4 years, in the next whole recruiting cycle, where you bring in the 2025 recruiting class, and then after they leave, after the 2025 class or much of it is gone from both Penn State and Michigan, will either of these teams have a chance to be viewed as the number one program, the best program in the Big Ten? And if so, who has the better chance? That's what I'm asking here today. And before I give you my answer, please subscribe, hit the bell, and comment your thoughts on this question down below. Oregon and Ohio State are viewed unanimously almost as the top 2 Big Ten programs moving forward. Now, I think besides Michigan and Penn State, USC may have something to say about that. If Nebraska finds a way to improve their recruiting identity and Rule reveals himself to be this top 15, top 10 coach, I think they can contend for being one of the better programs in the Big Ten. Probably not quite number one like USC, Penn State, and Michigan, but I think they can be close to that. So when I look at it, and I look at these two teams, Penn State obviously struggled to break through that glass ceiling of eliteness. They've been a great near-elite team, have struggled to be elite. Michigan has broken through the glass ceiling, but the regime who did it with Harbaugh, Minter, and Moore are gone. Or in the case of Moore, he's still at Michigan, but he's in a completely different position. He has to be the CEO and the big fish, the big cheese, rather than being just a part of the machine. So these teams right now are not the best in the Big Ten. I would not say they're top 2 in the Big Ten either. I actually agree with the consensus right now that it looks like it's going to be Ohio State and Oregon as the best programs in the Big Ten moving forward. At least I agree that that's the case right now, and there's a high chance it is that way moving forward. You should also know that I view Penn State as the number one team in America for 2025. I think that Penn State's going to win it all this year. And I say that because out of the teams that reached the semifinal last year, they're the only team that's returning 60% of its production. They're the only team that's upgrading their coaching staff. Texas had an elite staff. They still do. They just pushed. They kept their staff practically the same in rankings. Penn State replaced Allen with Jim Knowles. That's a massive, massive upgrade. And Ohio State lost Knowles, replaced him with Patricia, which is a downgrade. I think Hartline's a downgrade from Kelly, at least in the short term. Long term, I think he has a high chance of being an upgrade. And then Notre Dame replace Al Golden with Chris Ash. I think that's a definite downgrade. So that, in addition to having possibly the number one overall pick in the 2026 NFL draft with Drew Allar, and having a lot of seniors, a lot of All-Americans, whether from different magazines or grading services, like you look at Zane Durant, you look at Denai Dennis Sutton, you look at Luke Reynolds is viewed by many as a breakout player, Nicholas Singleton, Allen viewed as All-Americans, Ole Vega Ione and Nick Dawkins, interior offensive linemen, have that kind of respect. Same with A.J. Harris at corner, who's viewed as a way too early first-rounder in the 2026 NFL draft. Tony Roas clocked a 4.39 at linebacker. And Zakee Wheatley, I love Zakee Wheatley at safety. So Penn State having a national championship in their future, at least in my opinion, and actually in many persons' opinions, having a national title in their future, that certainly helps their odds against Michigan or against almost any other team in the Big Ten of having a shot to be the Big Ten's best program in the near and maybe even long-term future. But, and while Penn State has resources, and they do have donors, and they do have the whole, they have the whole Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, the whole DMV area to almost exclusively recruit. And then they have New Jersey as well, New York. Doesn't mean they'll get everyone, but they have a lot of that to themselves, and they do a really good job recruiting homegrown talent in Pennsylvania who produces good football. Michigan also has a good football recruiting base at home in their own state. Michigan has been able to go into Ohio at times and get some lower-ranked players who have high ceilings and develop them, like Rod Moore, and many think Jordan Marshall at running back. And Michigan traditionally has recruited better than Penn State. Doesn't mean they always will, but they brought in a much better recruiting class entering 2025. They have a quarterback in Bryce Underwood, who many view as more Cam Newton and more Vince Young than DJ Lagway, and DJ Lagway is viewed by many as a Cam Newton level QB. And they upgraded their offensive coordinator. They upgraded their staff as well. They, out with Kirk Campbell, in with Chip Lindsey. And I think that Sharon Moore, being a first-time head coach last year and making the amount of mistakes he did, likely means with how young he is that he is going to learn and improve entering 2025 and beyond. Wink Martindale learned some things and adapted to being more of a college defensive coordinator than an NFL one with Michigan last year. And yes, Michigan loses Mason Grant. They lose Kenneth Grant, lose Josiah Stewart. And while I don't quite think they will replace them in the way that Penn State will probably replace Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter, Penn State just has recruited much better at tight end, so it's much easier for them, I think, to replace Warren than it is for Michigan to replace Loveland. And Penn State doesn't lose as much on the D line as Michigan does, so it'll be easier for them to reload there than Michigan. Rayshawn Benny graded out as high as Kenneth Grant last year, and I think he could be an All-American. And then you got Trey Pierce, Damon Payne Jr., Ike Awuna, and Trey Williams, who are all over 300 pounds, all of whom are juniors or older, all capable bodies, very talented guys. And Michigan returns Derek Moore, who could play himself into being a day 2 or even day 1 pick in the NFL. And then they return 4 senior linebackers in Jimmy Rolder, Ernest Hausman, Jashawn Barham. I believe the 4th is Jaden Hood. And Jair Hill graded out well per PFF and played well down the stretch. So these teams are very talented. They are. And in recent memory, Michigan has outdeveloped Ohio State in college and even in the NFL. They have, relative to how they recruit. And Penn State, some would argue even Penn State has in recent memory. Some would argue that. I'm not going to go quite that far, but I will listen to such an argument. I think Penn State right now has the best staff in America. Michigan's I don't think is close to that, but it's better than it was last year. Michigan certainly has the greater future at QB, and I think given their donors and their NIL engagement, I think Michigan right now has more resources than Penn State. All of these things combine to give me a picture of who I think is the best shot of being that potential number 1 program in the Big Ten. All of those things do. I think Michigan has resources. They have the overall quarterback edge. I think Underwood has a higher ceiling than Allar and will probably be viewed as a better collegiate player than Allar. I think that Michigan still has a edge to them overall in terms of reputation with recruits, so that helps as well. But I think that is withering away in a lot of different ways. I mean, some of that's there because I think they're more willing to pay high school guys than Penn State is. But Michigan's regime that won the title and that had 3 Big Ten championships and 3 playoff appearances in a row, they're gone. I mean, they're totally gone. And Penn State has the staff continuity advantage. They have a defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles, who's a better DC than even Jesse Minner. In my mind, they have an OC in Andy Kolnicki who's better than anyone Michigan's had at OC in quite a bit. And Chuck Losey, I think Chuck Losey might be the next Ben Herbert. Might. Like, is that top-tier alpha strength and conditioning coach. He's up there. And that combined with seniority and Penn State using the blueprint of Michigan and Ohio State. And on top of that, they've lost a lot of players before, and they reload. And they're an NFL factory too. And I look at it again, Michigan with resources, they still have they have a better reputation in terms of recency bias over the past, 4, 3, even really 2 years, because Michigan's title is still within reach, still within the rearview mirror. And then they also have a brighter future at QB, I think. But I will tell you, Penn State, as of last year, has developed better. They have coached better. They have superior coordinators and superior assistant coaches right now. They are more proven at head coach. They also, I believe, have a better athletic director in Pat Kraft compared to Ward Manuel, which helps. And Penn State's schedule, they're unrivaled. as their name says, and not having to play Ohio State every year, not having to play anyone every year, and your schedule consistently rotates, and you're playing an easier non-conference schedule than Michigan is, and just the fact that, I'm going to be honest here and just come out and say it, just Jim Knowles being there and likely for a few years tells me that Penn State's probably going to be better than they ever have been under Franklin in that given stretch. Because Knowles is a genius. Look at what he did at Ohio State, what he did at Oklahoma State, what he did at Duke. And his defense has continued to get better and better and better. And this is the best situation he's ever walked into. And if they can retain Koldenicki, that's huge too. I think right now they have easily the best coordinator duo in America. So I'll go with Penn State. I think Penn State actually has much better odds than Michigan of being the Big Ten's best. Michigan still has odds, like more than 0% odds to be the best in the Big Ten, though. With Underwood, with the buy-in they have, the resources, the fact that Moore and much of that staff is very young, and they have some good coaches, some great coaches like Lou Esposito, for example. It's possible, but right now I would give the edge to Penn State as the team in the Big Ten that has the best chance to overthrow Oregon and Ohio State. Michigan has a chance too, but it's not nearly the same as Penn State's. I think Penn State's going to field an elite team this year, one of the best teams of the 2020s, better than some of the previous national champions that have come before them, assuming that Penn State follows through on my prediction and wins it all in the style that I think they will. And if they can keep Knowles and Koldenicki, and with the way they've been developing and recruiting, I imagine while they're not going to be a national title contender talent-wise in the way that Oregon and Ohio State will, they may outdevelop them to a point that they'll be in that same conversation. And even if they aren't, this is going to be a team that wins about 11, 10 games every year, and in many years is competing for that trophy in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below, and hit the bell. I'll see you in the next video segment.